now let's move on. The world of energy is a big theme at this year's World Economic Forum in Davos, and thanks to a cocktail of geopolitics, the war in Ukraine and Gaza, and other vulnerabilities, such as the Houthi rebels firing at ocean-going vessels at the Red Sea. Now, Espen Mehlum is the head of Energy Transition Intelligence and Regional Acceleration at the World Economic Forum, and he spoke to Arise business anchor Rolake Akikugbe-Filani on those key energy themes. Take a listen.
You're welcome to this exclusive Arise News report with Espen Mehlum, the head of Energy Transition Intelligence and Regional Acceleration at the World Economic Forum. Great to be speaking to you, Espen.
Pleasure to be here.
Yes, so energy is always a big theme at Davos. It's a big theme at climate discussions. In fact, it kind of keeps the world going. What have been some of the big conversations that have been happening here with regards to the global energy landscape?
Let me highlight maybe 3 points for you. One is really on transforming energy demand. The second is on equity and inclusion. And the third is on how to strengthen the business and economic case for transition. On transforming energy demand, we know that at COP there was a pledge by many countries to double the rate of energy efficiency and tripling renewables. This is a very promising sign. And actually a report that we have put out with the International Business Council here in Davos shows there's a 2 trillion annual savings potential on energy if the right actions are taken. Business can do a lot within their companies and in their value chains, but they also need the right policies to support this. So that's the demand thing. On equity and inclusion, that's a fundamental dimension of energy system. It should be sustainable, it should be secure, but it also needs to be equitable and inclusive. And that has many dimensions. It's about energy access in places like Africa. It's about affordability of energy, but also jobs transitions or those types of things. So an energy transition that is not inclusive will not be successful. It will at best be slow. At worst, it won't happen. And the third is around how can you really strengthen the business and economic case for energy transition? A lot is happening. Last year, we added a lot of renewables to the system, but we need to transition much faster. Investments will follow where there is opportunity. We need to find ways through policy and other incentives to strengthen the business case to further speed up transition.
Yeah, so we've got 3 main points here: the demand side, the equity and inclusion, and then strengthening the business case. It's interesting you mentioned strengthening the business case, because one of the really interesting things I heard here today was about not pushing decarbonization so much that we end up deindustrializing. I thought that was a really interesting concept, because we've always said for regions like Africa there needs to be some level of pragmatism when you look at the energy transition. So can you tell us what the new thinking around decarbonization is, both from a government perspective and a private sector perspective?
Yeah. So energy is fundamental to everybody, to you and I, to companies, to society. Without energy, it won't work. And what's very important is that, yes, it's sustainable, so we can decarbonize, and there we're up against a huge challenge. We're about to reach 1.5 degrees very soon on the current tracks. We need to find ways. But at the same time, we need to operate the current system. We can't switch overnight. And that's very important there to take action on several fronts. For first of all, I mentioned the demand side, efficiency. We have to do that much quicker than we do. Renewables, we have the goals to triple. Last year, we added more renewables capacity in the world than the total nuclear fleet of the world. So progress is happening. But at the same time, we need to find solutions also for hard-to-abate sectors. That will take more time. And we have to keep energy affordable. And that's where we have to find the balance between, as you say, decarbonization, but also providing the energy that the world needs.
Indeed. And, with regards to energy dependence and insecurity, we've heard a lot from Europe, the European Union this year. Gas, obviously, is a regional business. And one of the really interesting things that Ursula von der Leyen said during her speech was the fact that Europe has reduced its dependence on Russian gas in the last 2 years. She mentioned some of the data around that. And that was really interesting. And I wondered whether you see opportunities for other regions, particularly in developing countries, to build some form of regional security around energy with regards to commodities like gas. What's your take on that?
Totally. I think the energy crisis has been a wake-up call for Europe, but also for other regions, but also shown what's really possible when pressured, right?
Yes.
So what Europe has achieved, first of all, in terms of reducing the dependence on Russian gas in a very fast way that nobody suspected was possible, ramping up LNG and other sources of energy, and at the same time really engaging the population and also industries in terms of saving energy in ways we didn't think was possible in that time frame, really shows the way, I think, for what's possible. Of course, other countries can learn from this, but Europe was also helped by, as you say, regional integration and the fact there is some infrastructure connections.
Right.
There was a coordination in terms of the response. And that's also a very, very important point, that there needs to be more grid interconnections between countries, within countries, to get the most out of our energy resources. And there needs to be dialogue and cooperation also within regions such as Africa, Asia, Latin America and others.
Yeah, and I think you make a very important point there around regional integration, which serves as a great foundation for, energy supplies within the region. So if we look at what is happening in global markets, a lot of analysts who look at energy markets, sometimes they say, well, the global energy markets are no longer vulnerable to geopolitical crisis, and we have these waves where things happen around the world and prices are fine. And then we have these cycles where just even a little conflict somewhere, you suddenly see prices move up, affecting everyone. What's your take on how the big geopolitical events in 2024 will impact not just the price landscape, but even demand and supply?
Yeah. First, to understand what might happen going forward, let's try to understand what happened recently. So what really happened is that we had a series of shocks. We had the COVID shock, we had a tight situation in the energy market, and at that moment there was a war where Russia attacked Ukraine, which sparked this crisis, hit Europe, but also others, and energy markets are interconnected. Now the situation is looking better this year. A lot has been learned from the crisis. There is ample supply in gas markets currently, but that doesn't shield us from black swan type of events or major geopolitical happenings, as we of course see the problems in the Middle East with the war, the attacks on some of the major logistical routes there. If that escalates, that could be one of those things that we haven't really factored in, but it could have huge implications, of course, on the energy system. So it's about building flexibility into the system, diversified energy supply routes, diversified energy sources, build more renewables energy domestically, and use energy efficiently. Then you're better prepared as well, and of course also trying to anticipate what might be coming around the corner.
Yes, indeed. A couple more questions for you, Espen. I guess the one thing I wanted to ask you is the relationship between some of the supply chain crises we've seen. One of the interesting conversations I've heard today, particularly on the trade segment, is really around the fact that in order to diversify supply chains, you need more efficient manufacturing, you need more green manufacturing, and a lot of the energy sources have to be renewable and clean. So do you see that global supply chain re-strategizing by the public sector and the private sector will actually inadvertently lead to an increase in the contribution of green and cleaner energy to the global ecosystem? What are your thoughts on that?
I think what would be most efficient is, of course, a very open market where energy is produced and consumed, where it's the cheapest and the emissions are the lowest, and also have manufacturing capacity there. Now there are different factors that impacts things. One is, of course, that the security of supply, that people want to be sure they have enough energy in their country. There's also this element of reshoring some of the manufacturing activities, bringing it closer to home to be less exposed to some of these supply chain risks. There's also an element of countries want to attract jobs, green jobs. A lot of companies want, as you say, green energy for data centers, for manufacturing, etc. The supply might be a bottleneck, but if also those sectors who use energy can contribute both in terms of building capacity, using energy more efficiently, and really working with the suppliers, I think it can get much more going.
Yes, indeed. And some final thoughts here on Africa. Obviously, we're a Pan-African news channel, and I think many in our audience want to hear how Africa's engagement at the World Economic Forum has gone. But from an energy sector perspective, what are your three big ideas for Africa in terms of Africa pushing its energy transition agenda in a way that's sustainable, that it meets its needs today without jeopardizing the needs of future generations. Any thoughts or ideas you could share with us?
Yeah. So Africa is a continent that has a huge energy potential and, of course, a huge energy need in itself. And I think that's a very important primary concern for many. We know, of course, there is a huge share of the population does not have clean cooking access, for instance, and also clean electricity or electricity at all. So I think that's a primary concern in terms of delivering on those needs. Then, of course, for this to be also in a way that can create jobs for the economy and livelihoods, I think that's very, very important. Africa, also countries like Nigeria and others, have huge gas resources. I think there's a desire to unlock those resources for domestic use and for exports. That can be an important thing to think about. But I think this whole equity dimension is also critically important for the whole world. And part of that equity equation is for every country to take ownership of their own destiny, but then also for the advanced economies to take a bigger role in terms of helping Africa solve big problems like clean cooking for all, electricity access for all.
Yeah, fantastic. Great speaking to you. I wish we had time to even go into more detail. We've been speaking to Espen Mehlum, the head of energy transition, intelligence and regional acceleration at the World Economic Forum here live in Davos.